Prophetic gift. A spiritual gift which demands action. BD number 6587. July 3, 1956. The prophetic gift is indeed a gift of the Spirit too, nevertheless it is not a happiness-inducing state for a person because God only bestows this gift on someone with the purpose of drawing his fellow human beings' attention to forthcoming judgments and their consequences and to seriously admonish and warn them. For it only ever concerns people's spiritual welfare, their salvation of soul, which they ought to gain but often neglect due to lethargy and take paths which lead to disaster. However, all wrong thinking and every bad deed affects the soul, and a life in opposition to divine order will always result in degeneration. And according to law every sin will, sooner or later, have an unfavorable effect, and thus the whole of humanity's sinfully darkened state will also have such effects and result in judgments which intend to restore divine order again. People do not consider this in their blindness, hence their attention has to be drawn to it and they must be reprimanded to change their way of life. The consequences of their wrong attitude have to be made clear to them, and thus they must receive warnings. And the task of seers and prophets is to announce forthcoming judgments, to predict to people all that which will come to pass according to divine will and what they themselves can only know as a result of spiritual enlightenment, as a result of foreseeing the future, but which only refers to humanity's spiritual development, or as a result of God's revelations which they hear through the inner voice. To announce such events to people is not a happiness-inducing mission but a very necessary one, for which a person requires God's commission and subsequently must also comply with it if he wants to be of service to God and help his fellow human beings for the salvation of their souls. God will not let any judgment come upon humanity without informing them first, so that they will still have time to change themselves. For this reason many seers and prophets will still arise during the last days who clearly see the approach of the coming judgment before their spiritual eyes and who feel committed to inform their fellow human beings of what is awaiting them. They know that they will have to speak about it because they realize that it was shown to them for the sake of those who will have to fear such judgment. And although he will not be listened to gladly, he will nevertheless not fail to loudly proclaim what he knows in order to warn and admonish people. He himself derives no benefit at all from this gift, he is merely an instrument in the hands of God who avails himself of him in order to still influence people without forcing their will, who is able to speak through him to people himself so that they will all still be able to prepare themselves if they are of good will. However, the prophets of the end time will find little credence with people, and yet they will keep proclaiming what they know. They will often be ridiculed as false prophets or be treated with hostility, for God's adversary will appear at the same time, but he proclaims to people the opposite. He offers them hope for progress, he promises people a glorious time and a change for the better. And he tries to benefit from it himself. False prophets are not unselfish. They can be recognized by the fact that they allow themselves to be paid for their service, and they speak from their intellect. However, God's Spirit can only work in people who are utterly devoted to God and want to serve Him unselfishly. Therefore you humans are able to assess every prophet yourselves, for a genuine prophet has the salvation of people's souls at heart and only warns and admonishes them to bear the events in mind which he is meant to proclaim according to God's will. And you ought to listen to them, for they speak on God's instructions and in view of the near end. Amen.